Today's episode is proudly sponsored by the Rising Tide Mastermind. Each and every year, the Rising Tide Mastermind gets together in Atlanta for a live event. This is one of the most anticipated events within the Rising Tide Mastermind. Normally, we have a Zoom call each and every week, but this is where we all come together and we become better friends. We learn more about each other and we help each other with their issues. It is my favorite thing, and I'm sure it is going to be your favorite thing to look forward to if you were a member of the Rising Tide Mastermind. That could be a possibility. To find out if the Rising Tide Mastermind is right for you and you are right for the Rising Tide Mastermind, go to scalinguph2o.com/mastermind and you can schedule a 15-minute call with me to find out more. Welcome to the Scaling Up H2O podcast, a podcast where we scale up on knowledge so we don't scale up our systems. I'm your host, Trace Blackmore, and folks, I am hosting an award-winning podcast. Thank you so much to the Association of Water Technologies for recognizing this podcast and our audience with the Innovation Award. What a great honor this year. I'm getting ready to talk about Thanksgiving because that is something that I am definitely thankful for. I'm thankful for you tuning into this podcast each and every week, you telling your friends and colleagues about this podcast, and of course, this podcast being recognized as an award-winning podcast. So amazing. And as I just alluded to, Thanksgiving coming up in just a few short weeks. And nation, my favorite holiday is Thanksgiving, hands down. No other comparison. I love Thanksgiving. I love it for a couple reasons. One, I love it because we always have people over. We've been calling it Wayward Thanksgiving for as long as we can remember. We just open the doors to anybody that doesn't have anywhere else to go. So if somebody normally goes and visits family, and for some reason this year it just didn't work out that way, we invite them to come join us for Thanksgiving meal. We've had as few as 4 people at our table. We've had as many as 50-something people, not at the table, but in the entire house, which makes coordinating how much you're going to cook a little bit interesting. But hey, it does keep it interesting. And folks, I love to cook. It's one of my favorite things. I love it when I get to cook. I get to experiment with things. I figure out what works, what doesn't work, and then I write that down in my own recipe format. I have Excel sheets for all my recipes so I can double and triple and quarter recipes very easily. And what I'll do is I will try a new recipe, and if it works, great. I'll try to make it better next time. If it doesn't work, I'll definitely try to make it better next time, or I'll just decide, hey, I don't want to do this again. But I actually make notes every time I cook something, and I have all these different versions of it. Yes, that is me in the kitchen. I bring the lab into the kitchen, and I love every single minute of it. Now, what's going to be on our Thanksgiving table in just a few short weeks? Well, this is a never-changing menu, and then we, of course, have whoever's joining us bring whatever they want. But I do a brined turkey. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, I first learned about this in the 90s from one of my favorite chefs' favorite cooking show, Alton Brown. It was called Good Eats. I'm sure you can YouTube this. The episode was called Romancing the Bird, and he talked about how turkey can be dry sometimes, and he taught the world how to brine a turkey. Nation, I did that for the first time. I was extremely nervous. That was well over 20-something years ago. I brine at least one bird every single year, and I won't do it any other way. And a brine should be a water treater's favorite way to cook the turkey because we're using osmotic pressure. Yes, we're actually making a brine. So we have a high concentration of solids outside of the bird, a lower concentration inside. Well, hey, nature doesn't like that. So it's going to bring what's outside inside, and we can actually impart some flavor when we do that. So there's a recipe that Alton has on that Romancing the Bird show that I am sure you can find on our show notes page or just simply by Googling that. I've tweaked that over the years, but I tell you, you cannot mess up a bird with that. From there, I depart on what he then tells you to do. And I will tell you how he tells you to roast the bird in the oven is absolutely perfect. And I've done it and it works out very well. But I smoke the turkey. I did it for the first time many years ago. I cooked two, one in the oven in case I messed the one up that was smoking. Nobody ate the one that came out of the oven. I smoke a turkey every single year. It puts so much amazing flavor into that bird. And because it's brined, it is so incredibly juicy. So that's how I do the bird. Of course, the sides, green bean casserole, macaroni and cheese. And folks, this isn't any macaroni and cheese. This is award-winning macaroni and cheese. I won a best side competition at a barbecue contest with this macaroni and cheese. I actually put Cheez-Its on the top of it. Yes, that's right. The more processed food, the better. I make my own from scratch Parker House rolls. I've got my grandmother's sweet potato casserole recipe, and then I do dressing. And I know this is going to be controversial too, because is it stuffing? Is it dressing? Now, if you're not up on these lingos, stuffing is when you actually put the bread dressing inside of the bird and let it cook, where dressing is where you put it in a casserole dish and you cook it in the oven. Now, I put it in the smoker, and I think there's just too much smoke flavor inside that bread when I do it on the smoker. So that's why I decide to do it in a casserole dish inside of the oven. Now, if you live in the South like I do, this is a big debate. Is it stuffing? Is it dressing? Where is the proper way to cook this bread recipe? And typically it's a day-old bread that's soaked in custard and it had some vegetables in it. And it's one of my favorite dishes. All those things I mentioned are some of my favorite dishes. So that's what's going to be on our Thanksgiving table. You've got several weeks to start preparing for that. And if you live in Atlanta, let me know. If you don't have a place to go, you are welcome at our table. Who knows? Maybe someday I will come out with a Scaling Up H2O cookbook. I don't know if anybody would buy it, but I have a ton of recipes. Now, if you're in the Rising Tide Mastermind, you already have my macaroni and cheese recipe. A couple years ago, we swapped recipes with each other, and I got some good ones from some people. So ask people what they're going to do and how they're going to do it, and a lot of people will share that with you. Now, something I like to do the day after Thanksgiving is I love to go to Waffle House. Whole family goes to Waffle House for breakfast. That's what we do Friday morning, the day after Thanksgiving. And we do that for a couple reasons. One, I just spent the entire day the previous day, actually a couple days working up to that, cooking. I don't want to do that Friday morning. And Waffle House has just become a tradition for that. And what we do is we go into Waffle House early in the morning, and anything the day of Thanksgiving before 9 a.m. is considered early, and we order breakfast. For those of you that aren't familiar with Waffle House, I do feel sorry for you, but if you don't have one, you don't have one. They're primarily in the southern United States. They're actually in 19 states in the United States with over 1,900 locations. So there might be one towards you. And if there is, I recommend you try it. Now, when you first walk in there, you might say, what the heck am I getting myself into? There is no partition between where you sit and where your food is being prepared. I kind of like that. It's a little bit of theater going on. And based on who's actually in the restaurant, you might get more theater than you actually bargained for. But Waffle House is an experience. They've got a very limited menu where it's mostly Southern breakfast fare. But let me tell you, if you learn how to speak the lingo, you can order anything you can think of on and off of that menu, and you will amaze your friends with your Waffle House lingo. I think I can do an entire show just on Waffle House, but that will not be this show. So that's what we do the Friday after Thanksgiving. And we actually call that Pay It Forward Friday, because what we do is whoever is in the booth behind us, we pay for their breakfast. We've done it for years. And sometimes they know we did it, sometimes they don't. And when people ask, oh, how can we thank you? We say, hey, if you've got the opportunity to do the same thing, please do that. Now, one year we went to Chick-fil-A and we went through the drive-through, brought it home. But while we were in the drive-through, we paid for the car behind us. So we just like doing that. And the hope is we create these little ripple effects where people just start to realize that, hey, we've got way more in common with each other than we do different. And I'm now seeing the world in a little brighter vision, and maybe I'm going to do something nice for somebody else. Now, the other time we go to Waffle House, and my lovely bride Stacy is going to be upset that I'm telling you this, is Christmas morning. That has become a tradition. And the reason it's become a tradition is probably not what you're thinking. The reason it's a tradition is because it was the only time in our relationship that I was actually right. Now, we were dating. So this was long, long, long time ago. It was Christmas Day. We were both hungry. I did not have a lot of food in my apartment at the time. And I said, hey, let's go to Waffle House. Stacy said, Waffle House is closed. It's Christmas. And I was like, no, I'm pretty sure they're open today. She said, no, Trace, they are closed. And I said, well, hey, let's go take a drive. And if they're open, we'll eat. If not, we're not losing anything. We're in the same boat we are now. So she decided that that was a good idea. Of course, they were open. We went inside, we ate. And every year to commemorate that event, we eat there on Christmas morning. Now, Stacy may not remember it exactly that way, but you and I, Scaling Up Nation, we know that that was the one time that I was right in our relationship. So that's actually why we do that each and every Christmas morning to commemorate that. I hope this is one of the episodes Stacy doesn't listen to. So anyway, if you're friends with Stacy, distract her during this part if you guys are listening together. Well, Nation, the weekend after Thanksgiving, then we have Cyber Monday when everything else goes on sale online. And then we have Giving Tuesday. Now, Giving Tuesday is December 3rd this year. And as you know, Scaling Up Nation, we here on the podcast support Team World Vision and their global 6K each and every year. And we're, of course, going to do that next year as well. But if you are looking for a worthy cause to donate to on Giving Tuesday, please go to scalinguph2o.com/6K, and we'll have ways that you can donate to World Vision on Giving Tuesday, completely deductible. I definitely have all the right paperwork so you can deduct your donations, but you know it's going to a good cause, and it's a cause around water because they are all about bringing clean drinking water to where people did not have that before. And when you bring clean drinking water to where people live, people can stay in school. People can do more things around where they live and improve the community. And it is amazing what that does for the entire community when clean water is brought in. World Vision has done this for years. They are a master of this, and they can use our support. So stay tuned on our social media. We'll have some links to follow on our social media that will take you right to that donation page. By the way, if you are not connected with us on LinkedIn, we put out so much content around this podcast and the industrial water community on LinkedIn. So find scalinguph2o.com on LinkedIn. Find me on LinkedIn. Make sure that you connect and you will get all the stuff that we do on social media. It really is amazing, all the extra content that we put out. Well, Nation, I have to say, when I go to conventions like the AWT, people always stop me and say, Trace, I really enjoy learning more about your personal life on the podcast. So I hope they were serious because we did a lot of that today. You learned about Waffle House, you learned about what was going to be on my Thanksgiving table. So I hope you meant it. And I sure enjoy all of the comments that you have about the podcast. So keep those coming. But now we're going to go to our interview. My lab partner is James Courtney, CWT of CSC Technologies. James, how are you today?
I'm doing well.
James, we're going to be talking about sustainability today, and that word means a lot of things to a lot of people. So we're going to try to niche down on really what that is. But before we get there, do you mind introducing yourself to the Scaling Up Nation?
Sure. My name's James Courtney. I'm with CSC Technologies. We are a water treatment company in Maryland, and I've been in the industry for, I think we're coming up on 10 years now. And I had a hiatus in the middle where I moved away to be with my now wife up in New Jersey, but we moved back to Maryland. And when we did, I knew that I was going to have a job waiting for me at my dad's water treatment company. So I am second generation water treatment. And when I came back about 5 years ago, I just came back with a whole bunch of energy from being on the other side of that B2B relationship, where, the first 5 years I was running pinks and blues for my dad, helping him cover his account load and just kind of getting my feet wet. And to me, it was just interesting because, I'd get to see inside all kinds of businesses, but I never really had an appreciation for the benefit that we provide as water treaters. When I came back, I definitely drank the Kool-Aid on, this is a green industry. We help our customers by saving them money on water, electricity, fuel, and that really appealed to me after coming out of school with a biochemistry degree. So I had the chemistry background, but then a master's degree in environmental science and policy. So I was always looking at how do we make the world a better place, and I realized that I could do that in the field of water treatment. So I've tried to bring that energy to my work, and I think it's not only helped me be a better water treater, but it's just given me more satisfaction as well.
James, you have the prestigious Certified Water Technologist designation. Tell us about that journey.
Well, I kind of lucked out. I mean, we'll call it a silver lining. So I came back to the industry in July of 2019, got to have about a half a year of getting my feet back under me and relearning the tests. And then, a little thing called worldwide pandemic hit in 2020. And so I had tons of free time and a technical reference and training manual in my possession. So I decided right then and there that was going to be my COVID project to just churn through that chapter by chapter and really sink my teeth into this industry. And I learned so much, and I learned how much I didn't know and how much more there is to know. And I was really excited to have passed the examination. I was convinced that I was going to need to go back and take it a second time. So after I left the testing center and they handed me that sheet saying you passed, I might have lost my self control and shouted joyously while everyone else is taking their exams. But
It's allowed.
yeah, oh yeah. I mean, it was such a great relief. But like I said, it really helped me understand there is so much more to know. Getting the CWT was just the start of my journey, and I know now how much more there is to know, and I'm looking forward to delving in. And I think I've kind of made sustainability part of that niche. That's where I want to make my home.
Well, in addition to having the CWT designation, you also hold a LEED accreditation. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I got introduced to the lead concept while I was, on my hiatus. I was working for a couple different companies that lead would come up, and so I was at least familiar with lead. And then part of my journey to becoming a professional in the industry when I came back, I was like, oh, there's this water treatment podcast called Scaling Up.
I hear it's pretty good.
It's pretty decent. And I just decided I was going to start from episode 1 and start just churning through that and learning as much as I
God
could
bless you.
from
You
that.
started at episode 1. Oh my goodness.
Oh yeah, and so then episode 4, it's not easy being green with Charlie Cicchetti, and Charlie helps people get their LEED accreditation. He's got a company that provides training materials, and I took that course, and I was very much inspired by that course. I was like, you know what? Yeah, this is how I prove to myself, to our customers, that I am thinking in terms of sustainability, and this is going to bolster my credentials. And so I went after it. I got my lead GA and went on to get my lead AP in O&M, which is operations and maintenance. Uh, Honestly, I think the specialization was easier only because the GA is so general, and it's a whole lot of new material that it sounds like the most basic accreditation you can go for, but you learn so much new stuff there that it is a worthy challenge, I will say.
Yeah, I recall when I took my GA, lots of ASHRAE and different codes that you had to be familiar with, how many times air has to turn over during construction versus regular, things that we don't use on our regular day to day. But if you want to pass that exam, you better know it.
Oh yeah, no, I'm very disappointed to see how little our performance as water treaters actually features in the scoring system that they have for lead. I think it should be way, way more important. But yeah, no, you do have to learn all about the different aspects of what makes running a building efficiently in a way that is healthy for the occupants. All of these different considerations that go into it. That they're not what we specialize in as water treaters, but it's all part of the program, and it actually does give you a broad perspective. So I thought it was illuminating. I do appreciate that, but it was a lot to take in at first.
I was on their water steering committee for 2 years, and I will say it is better. It's not where it needs to be as far as all the different things that we can do as industrial water treaters to help with water conservation when it comes to LEED certification in buildings, but it's definitely getting a lot better.
So one of the things I emphasize to our customers is that for their buildings, most of the electricity, water, and fuel that gets used by the building is used by the heating and cooling system. If you've got a hot water boiler or a chiller, so the efficient operation of those systems makes the biggest impact on the overall footprint of that building. So, in my opinion, we're very important.
I think, in my opinion, and everybody who listens to this podcast's opinion, I might add. James, I'm sure there are members out there in the Scaling Up Nation that are saying, that voice sounds familiar. And this is not the first time that you've been featured on the Scaling Up H2O podcast. Episode 325, we got to hear the finalist of our Mastermind live event assignment, where we were all assigned to do TED style talks. And we gave those to our individual groups, and then the individual groups nominated the finalist. And you got to stand on the red dot and give your TED Talk. So, Nation, if you haven't heard that, you can go back to episode 325. As a reminder, tell us what you were talking about.
So I was talking about a topic that is near and dear to my heart, not just sustainability, but the sustainability of aquaculture. So I have a niche interest in oysters. I'm from Maryland, so all about the Chesapeake Bay. And one of the projects that I worked on while I was in grad school was all about the sustainability of the aquaculture industry and some of its unsavory practices. We're overfishing the natural environment. Most people are already aware of that. So some people think, okay, well, we'll just farm fish and that'll be perfect because that's sustainable. We're not taking anything from the environment anymore. But a lot of those practices can actually still be deleterious. And it was my way of trying to leave as much of an impact as I could on our group in 5 to 10 minutes of talk. And somehow I'm back talking about sustainability. I think this might be my thing.
They downloaded a card that they keep in their wallet. And now, whenever they go to a restaurant and order fish, they make sure that it's on the appropriate list. That was because of you.
No kidding. I should probably get that card as well. I mean, look, I'm no stranger to sushi. I'm a big fan. Uh, Generally, I would say, you could eat tilapia pretty unguiltily. That is a fish that has a low carbon footprint. It's a fish that eats plant food, not other fish, so it's going to be more sustainable. So I don't think you're going to get any tilapia at a sushi restaurant, but at your grocery store, that's a good go-to choice.
I'll try to find that card and I'll put it on the show notes page for this show. James, let's get into our main discussion. And I want to start out. AWT did a paper, Andy Reimink. He was talking about sustainability at this past year's AWT. And he started out with a word cloud. And he had everybody put one word up when they thought about sustainability. Share with the audience some of those words you remember popping up.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So if you didn't have the pleasure of attending the AWT conference or you were at a different talk, I think Andy did a great job with that. That was brilliant because you really get the sense that there are a lot of emotions swirling around this word sustainability. Some people think, green or energy efficient. Some people think communism or, government overreach. And it's all part of the landscape. This is a topic that is fraught with politics. It's not just a matter of, hey, is this good for the environment or not? We have a lot of discussions swirling around this. So sustainability is not a one note issue.
You were reading an article not too very long ago, and the concept was, is all water equal? And that brings up so many thoughts. Let me ask, is all water equal?
I mean, we as water treaters know definitively no. But the way that came up, at least for me, was a Reddit post where someone was talking about their spouse's shower habits, and they'd leave the shower on for an hour just waiting to jump in, and then she'd turn it off. He'd get mad. It's not that wasteful. And well, yes, it is. And someone's like, well, how wasteful can a shower be if a hamburger takes 660 gallons to make? And that kind of struck me. It's like, well, it's not like there's a big vat where you pour in 660 gallons of water and out pops a hamburger. But the wider public doesn't really have this concept of where all that water comes from, what that water is used for. So 660 gallons, I mean, that's all the water that goes into the feed for the animal, plus what the animal consumes, and for all the toppings included as well. But that 660 gallons of water isn't water that would have otherwise gone through your tap. The water that goes through your tap is a fraction of what's actually collected and treated by your municipal system or comes out of your well. Most of the water that we get flows, through the environment, and we treat a small bit of that. And in doing so, we are exerting energy. We are taking chemicals and either adding that to the water so that it's safe for consumption, or the European way is to pull stuff out, and all of that takes energy. But that 660 gallons doesn't go back to the environment if we were to abstain from eating that hamburger.
So who wins that argument? The person saying the hamburger takes 660 gallons, or the guy that wants to have 660 gallons go down the drain because he's not ready to get in the shower?
I try to look at it as an opportunity to inform both about their misconceptions about where that water comes from, where it goes, and the impact that it has. They could both stand to be more conscious. I mean, they're not wrong that if you eat less red meat, you would have a lower impact. And if you would just jump in the shower and take your shower and shut it off, 20 minutes is reasonable. You'd be a lot more sustainable, and your water bill and your heating bill would probably be a lot less. You save yourself.
You sent me a link before we got on this interview for waterprint.org. So I went on there and put in some stuff to see what my water footprint was. And just by clicking you eat meat, it went up astronomically.
Oh yeah.
I eat my fair portion of meat, I'm going to say.
And I'm not a vegetarian by any means. We do try to eat more vegetarian meals these days at our house, but I mean, look, I love a good steak or even just a nice piece of fried chicken. But all the water that goes into growing the food that our food eats adds up pretty quickly. So there's this idea of trophic levels, and every time you go from one to the next, only about 10% of the energy is transferred from one to the other. So by staying closer to the bottom of the pyramid, we're able to feed more people with less food. So it's better sustainability, uses up less land. We don't have to, use as much land for agriculture, either in housing the animals that we would have eaten or in the amount of land that we would use for cultivating the crops to feed those animals. So it is more sustainable. Now there are places where it makes more sense to grow livestock than it is to, grow a field of wheat, but that's a whole nother conversation.
You mentioned Charlie Cicchetti earlier. He's working with a company that's raising grasshoppers because it's so sustainable and so high in protein. And he's selling this grasshopper powder, protein powder, to protein shake people, to not necessarily the power bar, but those gym bars that you will eat. And if you look at the stores, you'll see a lot of insect protein out there now.
I know that's not what most Americans want to hear. They don't want to trade up their steak for a grasshopper, but the future of sustainable protein is insects. I mean, I know there's a lot of people working on lab grown meat. I would be willing to try it.
Oh, Burger King has the Impossible Burger. That's pretty much what that is, isn't it?
They're not bad. I'm partial to the Beyond Meat burger. The Impossible is not really my game, but insects are a very high source of protein. Most places around the world are okay with it. I don't know if I even say most places around the world, but other cultures are very okay with consuming insects and insect protein. And I've tried fried mealworms, and those are pretty good.
I will take your word for it.
I don't think we're in danger of seeing those hit the shelves anytime soon, but maybe it'll start as like snacks. You'll see a little dare snack, and then people will actually start to try it. And all right, this isn't too bad.
Enough about eating bugs. Let's shift gears a little bit. So, we're all water treaters that listen to this podcast. So, what does the water treater need to know when the word sustainability comes up?
For our industry, I think sustainability needs to be something that we keep in the front of our minds. As water treaters, we operate in this space where we are directly responsible for the sustainability of our customers. If you do a good job as a water treater, you help your customer reduce their carbon footprint, how much water they use, how much electricity, how much fuel they use. And there's a lot of different ways that we can do that. We can, be better about getting higher cycles of conductivity. We can make sure that, we're running boilers without scale, getting our customers to do all the necessary cleanings to keep all these surfaces clean and efficient. But we also have to keep in mind that green is not a buzzword. Here we go. I don't want to think of it as a buzzword. I want to actually believe in the green movement, but there are definitely going to be people who approach this with a mentality that, well, we can just call something green and it's a good idea and nobody needs to think about it. And that absolutely should never, ever be the case. I do want to support the green movement, but nothing is so sacred that it can't be interrogated. And especially in an effort to prevent greenwashing, which is where somebody presents an idea as being sustainable, as creating some sort of savings, but it doesn't actually materialize, that's something that really gets under my skin. So I try to be very conscious of, does this idea actually hold water? Does it actually provide benefit?
I've had the honor of teaching water treatment for so many years. And one of the organizations I do that with is the Association of Water Technologies. And normally we would have one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast. And I always talk about green and sustainability. And when I do, depending on which coast I was on, there was a very different interpretation of that. So I've adopted, a matter of fact, I think I say this in episode 4 that you mentioned, that water treatment has any definition of green covered. If green is the carbon footprint, all right, we definitely do that. We use less water. We make sure that there's less energy going into all the things that we're treating. We've got that aspect of green covered. On the other side, we've got to pay for water. We've got to pay for all that energy, all of those different resources. So if you're worried about saving green, the greenback dollar, of course, we've got that covered. So, however you define it, water treatment is your place to practice it.
Oh, absolutely. And honestly, I haven't met too many customers who are thinking in terms of, I want to maximize my sustainability, but everyone wants to minimize how much they're spending. So anytime you encounter an issue, uh, whether it's a leak or a piece of equipment not feeding right, um, I found it effective to always bring it back to the greenback. A small leak in a heating system, they'll look at that and go, that's not a big deal. Okay, well, you can actually quantify, what's the rate of that leak? What's the temperature of that water? What are you spending to heat that water up? And what are you spending to put that water back in the system? You can actually bring it back to here's a dollar amount that problem is costing you. We've had a customer that had a 30-year-old cooling tower. It was not in great condition, full of holes, leaking all over the place. We could never get it to run higher than 2 cycles. And it was maybe not even 500 tons of cooling, whereas they had a central plant that had a bigger cooling tower. We looked at the makeup water rates. The big cooling tower was using close to about 30,000 gallons of water a month. The smaller cooling tower was using about 8,000 gallons of water a day. So the smaller cooling tower was just flying through water. And when we actually brought that to them, suddenly it went from, whatever, the cooling tower leaks, that's fine, to, oh, we're hemorrhaging money besides water. So you would hope that they would look at that and think, I'm not being a good steward of resources. I'm just wasting a ton of water. But if it takes a little bit of encouragement and direction to get them to start to think in terms of what is it actually costing me, that is a value that we can provide. We're uniquely suited to help them identify those costs and help them figure out what's the right solution to fix it.
That's a great story. And that's my favorite way to sell industrial water treatment: return on investment. So maybe we're more than what the other company is, or maybe we're advising that they switch out their cooling tower or replumb their system so they can use a central plant instead of the tower you were speaking of. And now they can figure, it's going to take me 6 months to recoup whatever this investment was. And then I'm saving money, and we're saving green, whether it's I'm spending less money on the actual operation, or the green where I'm reducing the amount of resources that it takes to run my operation.
Absolutely.
James, how have you used your LEED accreditation to not only educate customers, but to get new business?
So I don't know that my lead accreditation has led to any new sales per se, but it has definitely helped me with my approach to water treatment. We actually can quantify, or we try to quantify as best we can, all of the different impacts that we have. So that's rehashing water, electricity, fuel. All of those things are measurable. And a lot of times we have customers who don't have any meters on any of those systems. LEED actually requires you to have meters on all of those things so you can actually see, are the methods that you're employing to be more efficient actually having the results that you want. So wherever we can, we are bringing water meters in to actually demonstrate, here's the impact that we're having on your utilities. Until you actually have hard data, you can't prove the impact of the work that you're doing. You can say I'm saving you water, electricity, fuel, etc. But until you can tie that back to an actual amount, and then possibly tie that back to a dollar amount for them, you're just saying, "Oh, well, yeah, this is good and we're doing great." If your utility company said, "We're going to charge you what we feel like," you'd probably be pretty mad. No, you want to tie that back to, all right, how many kilowatt hours did I use and what was my rate? So if we want to be better water treaters, if we want to actually prove the benefits that we're providing, we have to go back to measuring the water, measuring the electricity, the fuel. I mean, you'd have to get your customers to share some of that data with you, but I think we surprised a few of our customers by installing some of these meters. We had a boiler system that last season went through 500,000 gallons of water, and the mechanical contractor could not believe it, would not believe it. And we went back through the building and we found a condensate receiver, which was blocked, was not coming back to the system, and it was just hemorrhaging water onto the floor. I'm like, well, there it is right there. The meter led to data, which made them scratch their heads, made them go looking for the source of the issue. We found the issue. Uh, they're still working with the building owner to get that condensate receiver replaced, but that's maybe not 500,000 gallons, but a good amount of water and energy that was just being wasted to the sewer that they could now potentially bring back. And that's all because we stuck a meter in there. It costs what, $100? So meters give you information. Information gives you the opportunity to find solutions to problems you didn't even know you had.
There you go. I think it was Peter Drucker that said, "What gets measured gets better," because now you're actually looking at it. And I love that you said it was $100 or $200 meter that saved how many tens of thousands of dollars of water that they were wasting?
Reminds me of a story about a Swedish village where they built this housing development. There were two different models of houses. One actually had the energy meter inside the house on the main floor, and they found that same houses with that one crucial difference. The houses where the meters were placed, where people could see them, were significantly more efficient and used less energy just because people saw it and people made a game out of it. People wanted to see how low they could, get their usage down. So truly what gets measured gets managed, and we can be, stern and rigid and, you know, make this all about numbers, but at the end of the day, it's actually kind of fun to see, all right, how good can we get?
A couple of years ago, we took advantage of a federal program and we put solar panels on top of our facility. And then later that year, we actually put some batteries in. And with that, the tax breaks were the reason that we did it. And our electric bill sure is a lot better that we did it. And our ROI has already paid for itself. But one of the things that it came with was monitoring. And we installed an iPad in our conference room, and it says how much is coming from the grid, how much is coming from solar, how much we're using, how much we're selling back, all of that different stuff. And it became a game. And it showed us what our resting power consumption was, if you will. It showed almost 3 kilowatts. And we were saying, that's really, really high. And we started looking around the office and we had every single phone charger that we had ever had, whether we still own that phone or not. It was plugged into the wall. So we were doing AC to DC conversion. So we just unplugged all those and it went down tremendously. And then we noticed we have a Keurig machine that was being left on all day. So now we just turn it on when we use coffee. There was some space heaters, which I don't recommend anybody ever use space heaters, but some people were using space heaters. And we had the HVAC contractor come out and make adjustments to the plenum and adjusting the dampers. So now they got more heat and they didn't have to use them anymore. Now we were using a more efficient use of heat. And we got that below 1,000 watts or one kilowatt. And everybody was high-fiving themselves because we made a game out of it.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if that becomes accessible to the people in the building, but I mentioned one of our customers has two LEED platinum buildings. What's interesting about that is that they're two school buildings. They have the exact same envelope, which is they had two sites. They had one architect and they said, hey, this same blueprint can fit both squares land. Why pay to redesign a building? We'll just build the same building twice. So every aspect of the building should have the same energy consumption, same specs. And one of the cool things about these being LEED Platinum buildings, they've taken a lot of these meters and data and put them onto a website where the general public can actually see. They can actually see how much energy is each part of the building using, from the kitchen to appliances, lighting, and no surprise, the biggest energy draw is the HVAC system. So it's the pumps to move the geothermal water around, it's the motors, it's the refrigeration circuits. And one interesting thing I noted when I was comparing these two buildings is one had a significantly higher kilowatt hour usage for the HVAC system. Again, why would these two buildings with the exact same footprint have a different energy usage? And when I actually took that data to their management, they actually had an answer for that. They were like, "Oh yeah, well, like this pump is having a problem. We've got parts on order, but wow, like you could actually see that in the data. Oh yeah, it's really cool that you can see minute by minute, month to month, year over year, and so part of them being LEED Platinum, they are actually a net zero school. So the solar panels on their roof generate more electricity than the building uses on a year-to-year basis. Here, it's winter; they're going to use more electricity than they generate. In the summer, they're going to create more electricity than they use. But on the whole, it adds up to net zero. So it's really cool to see the proof in that. Now, I've got other recommendations for them for ways they can be even greener, but that's between us and them.
The Department of Energy put out an article several years ago. About 20% of all the electricity made in the United States is going to heating and cooling. We as industrial water treaters just have a tremendous impact on such a valuable resource, not just the water, but all the energy that goes into heating and cooling. I can't think of any other industry out there where there's such a great impact with decisions that somebody makes can save all of that water, can save all of that energy. So, James, with all of that, what do you want people doing after listening to this podcast?
I would hope that people see that it's possible for them to get a handle on their own footprints, that there is a way to track it. All these things that we've been talking about for commercial buildings, industry, water meters, electrical meters, these things are available for your house. They make smart meters that could detect if there's a leak in your water piping, or if you're away and you let it know that you're away. If there's suddenly water usage, like a pipe burst, it can shut that valve off. For your electricity, that system you were talking about, they make that for residential applications as well. You can figure out where are the biggest energy vampires, and usually it's kind of the same as commercial and industrial. It's the heating and cooling of your house. That goes for your water heater as well. I was recently made aware of heat pump water heaters, which are anywhere between 2 to 3 times more expensive, but save hundreds of dollars on electricity every single year. It's just more efficient to move energy from even just the ambient air into a tank than it is to create new heat through a electrical coil. And that principle is actually playing out on a bigger scale. So we see this push towards electrification, not just in, how do we move around electric vehicles? We see people trying to figure out how do we electrify the whole building. We want to get away from fossil fuels. I saw an article recently where Johnson Controls released a demo for a hot water heater for commercial buildings that'll get up to 80 degrees Celsius water. So heat pumps not just for you know, heating and cooling your home anymore. I wouldn't be surprised to see if we start getting into heat pump boilers. Now, I don't know the technical logistics behind that, but that's kind of where the industry is going, is how do we be the most efficient with the electricity and get away from fossil fuels? It's going to be difficult. I've considered that for a while. How do we get a big industrial boiler off of propane or natural gas or fuel oil. I've heard stories of electrical element steam boilers, and I don't know if it was true, but they say when those things kicked on, the whole town dimmed a little bit.
My dad had a stereo like that.
So then what's the alternative? You know, I also hear about hydrogen powered. We've heard about hydrogen fuel cells. One of the problems with hydrogen is it's very small molecule, harder to store than propane or natural gas. It has a lower energy density, so you would need to burn more of it to get the same heat. So, how do we design the next generation of heating equipment to not use fossil fuels? And then how do we create the hydrogen? A lot of the hydrogen that we make is through electrolysis, which uses electricity, which, depending on where you are, that electricity is coming from burning fossil fuels like coal or natural gas, or maybe it is coming from solar, wind, nuclear, perhaps. Where we get that energy is a huge part of how sustainable is the operation of that piece of equipment.
So bottom line, don't fear it, embrace it, and figure out how can we work together knowing what we know about industrial water treatment and what's happening in the marketplace as far as new technologies. It's a great marriage.
Absolutely. And it's coming. That was definitely one of the takeaways from Andy's talk, was that, this is coming whether we like it or not. And I would just recommend that everyone actually embrace it. There's no reason that this has to be antagonistic. We are trying to figure out how to make our day-to-day lives work with the natural environment. We're trying to figure out how to make it make sense, and how do we do that without impacting our ability to provide a future for the next generation.
I think that's well said. James, I've got a few lightning round questions for you if you can stick around.
Sure.
All right. If you could go back in time and talk to your former self on your very first day as an industrial water treater, what advice would you give yourself?
Be open to learning everything. I started out just running pinks and blues. I didn't really have any context for what I was doing, why I was doing it. And I would just say, be hungry to learn, and just go after it. There's so much information out there. You can learn about anything you want. Most of it's available online for free. Even the paid stuff, you can probably find somebody who's offering that same information for free. So just there's more than you could possibly consume. Just find what you're interested in and just dive into it head first.
What are the last few books that you've read?
I've read a great book called Difficult Conversations, and that has actually been phenomenal for me. I know that this podcast has talked about the temperaments. I am a yellow, which means I am an extroverted, people oriented person. So you wouldn't think that somebody like that would have difficulty with conversations, but we all have difficult conversations, which they say is any conversation which is hard for you to have. And I think it gives a fantastic framework for how do you navigate conversations that you need to have, whether that's with your significant other, with a difficult customer, or with a cold calling prospect. All of these are potentially difficult conversations, and how do you make that smooth and productive for both parties?
When they make a movie about James Courtney, who do you want playing James?
It's an interesting question. I recently got told with my long hair that I had somewhat of a David Foster Wallace vibe. So I guess I'm going in the reverse of that. David Foster Wallace could have played me if he hadn't met an unfortunate early end. Maybe I could play David Foster Wallace biopic.
All right, so now you're getting work. I love it. We're trying to find work for our Hollywood actors, but you're taking it. I love it. Last question. You can now talk with anybody throughout history. Who to be with and why?
I might not be the first person to deliver this answer. I think Louis Godot might have said this during his podcast, but I would really love to talk to Voltaire. He was a Enlightenment era French satirist, and if you ever see Louis of the Tannin Guys, ask him about his fascination with Voltaire. He's got tons of great stuff, but Voltaire was a phenomenally funny, just interesting philosophical type of person who, rankled the French aristocracy and French Catholic Church. Didn't really make tons of friends nearby, but very interesting thoughts, including one quote that haunts me a little bit, but inspires me at the same time. He said something to the effect of, "Man is guilty of all the good he does not do." That's pretty hard to live up to. Knowing there's a whole world of good that each of us is capable of, and we have a responsibility to doing what we can. So that's, I think, part of my sustainability mission is doing what I can. And I think we all should do what we can.
James, I think that's a great way to end this interview. I want to thank you for coming on the Scaling Up H2O podcast and maybe changing some people's minds of how they think about sustainability and how we can bring sustainability and industrial water treatment together and make it better together.
I hope so. And if anybody sees me at an AWT event or technical training, I'd love to talk aquaculture and sustainability. So don't be shy.
You'll get them growing oysters in their basement. James, thanks so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure, Trace.
Well, once again, thank you, James. James is a great guy. Of course, met James through the Association of Water Technologies. James is now a mastermind member and just a huge fan of all the things that James is doing in his personal and professional life. And one of the things that James wants to make sure is we realize that we are in the most sustainable industry out there. That's water treatment. We were green before that was even a term. I like to, when I teach, tell people we are the original green industry. But that being said, there's always this division about being green or being sustainable. And I love this definition of sustainability. It's the idea of creating and maintaining conditions that allow humans and nature to exist in harmony for the benefit of both current and future generations. I don't think anybody has an issue with that definition. So I'm going to recommend that that's the definition we use when we think of the word sustainability. And when you think of the word green, no matter how you slice that, if it is about natural resources and how green our facility is, well, folks, if you're more sustainable and you're more aware of what you're using, by simply being aware, things get better. And you will use less natural resources. Now, if you're shelling out the dollars that we have to pay for those resources, well, if you're using less, you're going to pay for less. So that's why I say industrial water treatment has green covered, however you slice it. Now, if you want some of the resources that James mentioned, those will all be on our show notes page. And you might be wondering, hey, Trace, normally you do current events. You didn't do that in the beginning of the episode. Well, I thought I'd switch it up on you today. We're doing it towards the end of the episode. So on December 10th in Las Vegas, Nevada, you want to look for the National Groundwater Week Conference. And that is all about innovation in the groundwater industry. We're going to have all that information for you by going to our events page. That's scalinguph2o.com/events. And then also the Innovation and Certification Conference is taking place January 14th through 17th in New Orleans, Louisiana. What a great town. And this is all about certification and how to advance that certification for regulators, certifying authorities, operators, trainers, and all industry-related technology providers, all in one place around the water sector. We'll have all of that information for you on our events page. The 2025 Utility Management Conference is taking place February 11th through 14th in Dallas, Texas. And this conference is all about transformation to the circular water economy. So if you want to learn more about that, that will be on our events page. Also, the 2025 AHR Expo is taking place in Orlando, Florida, February 10th through 12th. And this is where manufacturers and suppliers bring all of their ideas and showcase that in the future of HVACR technology. So if you want to learn more about that, this is co-sponsored by ASHRAE. And if you want to learn more about that, we'll have that on our show notes page. Now, the last one I'll mention is the WET show with two W's and two T's. That stands for the Water and Wastewater Equipment, Treatment, and Transport Show. That's taking place on February 17th through 20th in Indianapolis, Indiana. This is the world's largest annual trade show for wastewater and environmental service professionals. And we'll, of course, have all that information and more. I spoke about 5 today, but folks, there are hundreds of things out there that if you want to attend, we have them available to you at scalinguph2o.com/events. Well, as always, on each and every episode, our friend James McDonald, that is trying to get us a little bit further, a little bit more knowledgeable about one thing. And we're going to learn about that one thing on a brand new Drop by Drop with James.
Welcome to Drop by Drop with James, the podcast segment where we wonder, explore, think about, imagine, and learn industrial water treatment, you guessed it, drop by drop, together. In today's episode, we're thinking about control ranges. There are a few trains of thought on control ranges. Which tests and readings really need a control range applied to them? How wide or narrow should the control range be? It's something one should consider carefully. I have seen control ranges applied to every test parameter for a makeup such as city water that the user had absolutely no control over. Are these control ranges really necessary? Sometimes they are, especially if the makeup source is susceptible to changes in water quality, such as total hardness, which can impact downstream softener performance. I've also seen control ranges so large a bus could slide through them sideways. What good is such a wide control range doing for the water system? Nothing was actually being controlled. I've seen control ranges that were so unreasonably narrow that the parameters were almost always out of range as well. What good does that serve? Is a better control system needed to meet those narrow ranges, or is a wider control range more fitting instead? A lot of you out there use field service reports that turn red, green, and sometimes yellow when a parameter is outside the control range. Not having good and proper control ranges can make that field service report's color coding nearly useless because it is always too red or even too green and not actually reflecting the true stressed or controlled state of the system. Control ranges that are too tight may yield field service reports that are red all the time, which will lead to either the end user ignoring the colors or being annoyed by the report always looking red. Control ranges that are too broad may not show the true state of stress the system is under and lead to more problems down the road. Lastly, I've seen reps be pressured by their customers to avoid red color coding as much as possible, leading to either uselessly wide control ranges or no control ranges at all. This can be a touchy subject, but your control ranges must be meaningful and useful. It may take some finesse to get everyone on the same side of the table on this, but seeing a little red when appropriate today beats dealing with the impact of a failed water system and wasted energy and water tomorrow. I'm James McDonald, and I want to encourage you to be like water by forming bonds with those around you, dissolving new knowledge, and making worthy ripples, drop by drop.
Thanks, James. Now, if you did not catch this during Industrial Water Week, James McDonald, of course, does Detective H2O. It's one of my favorite things that he does. And for the last couple of years, he has invited me in to do some of the guest characters and guest voices for that. Thank goodness James and I have a great friendship, and he does not judge me on my ability to do other voices outside of the one that you are hearing right now. So if you have not heard that, That is called The Case of Being Picture Perfect, and that was episode 386. We, of course, aired that right in the middle of Industrial Water Week, and I tried to do a New York accent. Now, thank goodness I just get to talk to you guys each and every week in my regular accent, but James asked me to do another one. So, James, thank you again for that. If you got some ideas on what I should try to make my voice sound like next year, I am all ears. I love doing it, and I love how kind you are when I actually do it. It doesn't always turn out the way I hoped, but it's entertaining, and that's what we go for. Nation, I love bringing this show to you each and every week, and I will have a new one for you next Friday, which means between now and then is your opportunity to think about what you're going to do for Thanksgiving. Even if you're not in the United States, what are you thankful about? How are you going to pay it forward? And how are you going to be a better water treater tomorrow than you are today? Have a great week, folks. Want to ensure you're fully prepared for the Certified Water Technologist examination? Our CWT prep course provides you with the tools and knowledge you need. From detailed study guides to a 100-question practice exam, we've got you covered. Visit scalinguph2o.com/CWT prep and start your journey to certification.